Well, Lisa just took up the first half of my talk. I was going to tell you about Sisters in Crime. She forgot to mention one thing, though. Lisa herself is an award-winning and a wonderful young adult author. My grandson, you didn't say that, I'm sure you did.
No.
My grandson really loves her books, and they carry them here at the store. So if any of you have young ones, it's the book to go. I always, first of all, a thank you to Lisa for the nice introduction, and to Aisha and Sherry, who isn't here today, who own this amazing bookstore and are so welcoming to readers and writers of all kinds. As you can see, they've created this wonderful homey atmosphere, and it's really a wonderful place just to stop in during the week, sit in the back, have some coffee, and read their wonderful books, and buy them. You know, I always print out notes, just really to force me to try and remember what this book was about. And I saw my husband laughing as they came off the printer, as they were being printed this morning, because I very rarely look at them. But it's sort of like my blanket, I guess. I feel better if I have my notes. And the reason it sometimes is hard to remember, I'm also bad with scarves, so if this falls off, don't be distracted. It's hard to remember what they're about because this is book 9 in the Seaside Knitters Mystery Series. I finished book 10, and I'm waiting for revisions on that one, which will come out in November. It's a holiday mystery with the same characters that are in this book. And I'm beginning work on the 11th one, which will come out next May. So I'm thinking about Murder at Lambsville Farm, which is the 11th one, the holiday book, which I know I'm going to have revisions on next week. And trying to remember this one, but as I remembered it today, read the cover copy, I really like this book. And I hope you like it too. And I'll tell you a little bit about it in a minute. But first of all, I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about the kind of book I write, then a little bit about the new book, and then I welcome questions either during the talk or at the end of it. So please jump in, wave your hands, scream at me. And thank you all for coming. One of the gentlemen who's here today is here at the directives of his mother. She doesn't live in Kansas City, and she emailed him and told him he just better get his butt over here and buy her a Mother's Day present. Sleuths, not a policeman or a detective. And they're kinder and they don't cater to blood and guts. They're easygoing, and after finding a dead body, you can usually have tea or wine. It's sort of the way I look at life, and the kind of book I would like to write. Most of the cozy mysteries have female protagonists, but not all of them. There are a few that don't. In my series, I happen to have 4 protagonists. Many cozy mysteries today, and I really think this is stimulated by the marketing department in publishing houses because they're easier to market. They require some kind of a hook. It can be a tea shop or a bookstore or a library series or a gluten-free bakery series. Yeah, there really is one. Mine happens to be knitting, and that's a good thing for the marketing department because they can call it a knitting mystery, but it's a good thing for me because knitting provides a place for my protagonists to get together, and because I have 4 of them, you know, unless they live on a little cul-de-sac, they can't be running into each other every day. But with a knitting shop at the core, it makes it easier. They also sort of establish a routine where their friendship has grown, and so now they do different things during the week together. So knitting has served me well, although I wouldn't say you'd learn to knit at all from my books. And Sue will identify with that, because I write these knitting books, and she takes my knitting and makes it look decent. So I didn't even learn to knit from writing these books. But I love knitting, and I love the feeling of yarn, the sensual aspect to it. And so that kind of features in the books too. The Seaside Knitting series featured, when I decided to write this series, there were a couple of things I wanted to accomplish. I wanted to delve into the area of female friendship. I wanted to watch how that evolves. And for that reason, I have 4 protagonists of 4 totally different age groups, and they become very dear friends. And I wanted to see how that works in a work of fiction. I found out it works a lot like it does in your life and in my life. These friends take care of each other. If they have a friend who loses her hair during chemo, they knit her hats to keep her warm. If someone's sick, they take soup. If someone's crying, they give her a shoulder. Just like you do, just like I do. So it evolved in a very comfortable way for me. And as they encounter different things throughout the mysteries, their friendship grows. And it's very satisfying for me to watch that growth. The other thing I wanted to do is to explore life in a small town. And I happen to have grown up in a small town in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, 37,000. I think it's 35,000 now, because my whole family left. But what I did was I went to Cape Ann, where my daughter just happens to live, along with amazing grandchildren. And it's a town right on the sea. And I loved the town. There were other towns around it as well. Gloucester is where The Perfect Storm was filmed, and where it actually happened. In fact, there's a character from The Perfect Storm that is one of my characters is kind of modeled after her, Linda Greenlaw, who is a lobster woman, and she was actually in the real Perfect Storm. She did not die. She was on shore, but she was involved in that movie. She also writes mysteries. But I loved her spunk, and I loved that she was a lobster woman, so I put one in my book. So that's where I found my town. But I did what filmmakers do. I went around the Cape, and I picked out the very best things of all the little towns that are on Cape Ann, and I created Sea Harbor. A fictitious town is a writer's safeguard in a way. If I have you turning left on Main Street, it's my Main Street. It's not a real Main Street, so you can't tell me you can't turn left on Main Street or you'll end up in the ocean. I can make it be whatever I want. If I had chosen Gloucester, I would have been tied to the actual geographic ramifications of that town. So it's kind of a cheater's way out, I guess. But also, I can make my town pretty perfect. And you're thinking, yeah, but 9 people have died there. That's where you just don't think about that. There's a movie out. I actually got the DVD. It's an old movie. It was called The Love Letter, with Ellen DeGeneres and Kate Capshaw and Tom Selleck. It was filmed a while ago, but the whole thing was filmed on Cape Ann. And they did exactly what I did. They created their own town, but they filmed it in all the little towns dotting the Cape. And it's, whenever I'm sitting here in landlocked Kansas, and I need to take me back to Sea Harbor, I slip it in and watch it again. Yeah, and it shows me these absolutely gorgeous spots, because the filmmakers did a really good job of picking out the most picturesque and beautiful places on Cape Ann. So that was my town. So I have my 4 characters, and I have my town. And I wanted to, the third thing I wanted to do was to entertain. And the fourth thing, I wanted to have a mystery to make all those other things happen. And that's how Side Kniters started. And that's the town that I created. This, as I said, is the 9th book. And I thought if I told you a little bit about this book, and I promise I won't talk too long because Tori's going to stop me if I talk. A finely knit murder. I thought if I told you a little bit about how I put the pieces of this book together, you'd get an idea of how some mysteries, my mysteries, are created. Everybody does it different. There's lots of wonderful mystery writers, Linda and Lisa, who can attest to this, and their method is probably not at all like mine. I'm what they call a pantser. I have a, that's writing by the seat of your pants. Mystery lingo. I know a little bit about the book when I start, but I usually have no idea who did it, and sometimes I usually know who died because my editor is really fussy and she likes a little synopsis. She kind of wants to make sure, since it's a murder mystery, that there's a body. Oh my God. And actually, usually what I do, I get together with Nancy Picard and I attack my family and I say, okay, I need to put something together. But it's so vague that when I don't stick to that, it usually I say, doesn't do any damage. And when I say usually, it's because I mentioned I'm writing the 11th book. Well, I'm starting it. And starting means I have a one-page synopsis. I don't have anything else written on this book. But yesterday, my editor sent me a cover sketch. And this is a cover sketch for a book that doesn't exist. So and it's wrong. It's the wrong season, and you know, so there are things they're going to have to change, but they will. But anyway, so that's why it has to have some credibility to it. Well, what I started with for this book, I actually started with a school. There's a school in Gloucester. It's a wonderful old school built out of granite, as most of Sea Harbor is. It's up on a hill, and it overlooks a beach called Niles Beach, which is a children's beach, really. It's small and it's safe. And my granddaughter Ruby went to preschool at this amazing school. It's called Eastern Point Day School. It had great teachers and was very welcoming. And it used to be, someone actually used to live in this big granite mansion. So I knew this was a perfect spot for a mystery. Then I started peopling it. I thought, okay, I have a school. I don't have a dead body. I don't have any people in this school. I had a headmistress come in, and I sort of wrote an essay about who she was. Then I knew I would have teachers, but I didn't define them. I thought I'd let them come into the school as the series evolved. Because it's a private school, I had a school board. I had a board for the school, not a school board, but a board for the school, which is prime for trouble. Just imagine. So that's what I had. Now, the next thing I needed to do, I needed to have my protagonist have a connection to the school. In the very first mystery I wrote, I was having a terrible time with it. I had this random guy killed in a random alley, found by a random person, and then I needed to bring my protagonist in to solve the crime. And I couldn't figure out why I couldn't move this book. So I gave it to my mentor, Nancy Picard, and she read it and she said, here's the problem. You don't have a connection between your protagonists, your women, and the body or the person who found it or where it was. So to have them just come in and want to solve this crime doesn't make any sense. And of course, she was right. So I started over, and the random body became an owner of the shop, and the person who found him happened to be the leading woman she knew. So, and she discovered she did. Well, Gabby lives in New York, but I thought it would be easy to come up. Her mother was dead. She had her father traveled a lot, so it would be easy to bring her back to Sea Harbor to go to school for a semester. So I brought Gabby back and I put her in Sea Harbor Country Day School. Then I still needed kind of a way to get the knitters involved. So I did two things. One, I put two of the knitters on the school board. Gabby's grandmother and Nella are on the school board. And then I did something that came to me because of something I did at least 250 years ago when my kids were at Prairie School. The PTA came up with an enhancement program for the kids. And once a month, parents would come in, whether they were doctors or nurses or Indian chiefs, they'd come in and they would teach classes for the kids on a Friday. And I thought, how perfect. The knitters could come in and teach knitting. And then I thought, okay, teach knitting, is that a good thing to teach? Because in our Prairie School enhancement program, we had a doctor come in and teach how to dissect a frog, and we had artists come in and teach really amazing art programs. Does knitting fit? And I found out it did. I did some research, and I know that knitting kind of relaxes me. It doesn't relax everyone. I have a friend who's a perfectionist, and she actually gets crazy when she's knitting. But some of us who make lots of mistakes, right, Sue? We relax when we knit. It keeps our hands busy, and we can watch TV. So it does that, but then I found out it does even more important things. It lowers your blood, it can lower your blood pressure. They've done studies to prove this. There's a school called the Waldorf School that a lot of you probably are familiar with. It's a very progressive learning technique. And they actually teach every student in their school how to knit before they teach them the alphabet. And the reason is, they think that knitting brings both sides of your brain together, and it also enhances fine motor skills. But as far as reading goes, it helps your brain develop in a way that it's easier to learn how to read. So I thought, knitting, it's perfect, right? And they needed a pretty spot. And the artist did just an amazing job. They do teach it out here on the patio. The book takes place in the fall. And so now I have my knitters at the school, and I have my head mistress. And originally, I thought, see what I mean? Originally, I do. Yes, I need one with Velcro. Yeah. So originally, I was going to kill the headmistress, and I started writing about her. I started the book with the headmistress, and I started to really like her. And I thought, she's doing such a good job with this school. So I decided who's going to be on this board and who's going to this school. And I discovered there was a little girl going to this school who's not quite like other children. She has some problems. She has some problems learning. And her parents are positive this school is the very best place for her. There happens to be a really vocal board member whose relative donated this school years and years before, who's also on the board. She's emeritus, and they can't get rid of her. She really doesn't think this little girl belongs in this school. And the little girl's father is on this school board. So you can see some friction developing right away. She also, this obstreperous board member, has been responsible for having a teacher fired. So we have an angry teacher, an artist. Artists can get really angry. So we have a board member that doesn't like another board member. We have a teacher whose livelihood has been ripped away from him by this board member. And we have a headmistress who can't stand this board member because she wants to get the headmistress fired as well. So who am I going to kill? I wasn't going to tell you until I read the cover flap, and it tells you. So this board member, Blythe, is the person who ends up being killed. And there are so many suspicious characters all over the place that I knew that it wouldn't be difficult to find one who was the murderer. Which brings me to another thing that I wanted to talk about. How do I find a motive for a murder in a cozy mystery? Sometimes I do throw this out to my husband, who usually comes up with a drug running scheme. Some sort of very elaborate, very interesting espionage. But my murders are more simple than that. The way I come up with a motive is I look at myself, and I look at my friends, and I look at all of you, and I don't think we're all capable of murdering. God, I hope none of you do it. But I think there are things that make us think we wish that person maybe was not around. Right? I mean, think about it.
That's what an imagination is for. It allows you to throttle those people who deserve it.
That's right.
Without laying a hand on them.
That's right. That's right. It's the cheapest kind of therapy, right?
Right.
Can you hire a hitman?
Yeah. Actually, I was thinking about there really are no hired assassins in cozy.
Not in cozy.
It's much simpler than that. And I honestly do that. So I look at, is it to protect someone? I mean, is there anyone in your life, if you thought maybe a bad person was going to hurt this amazing person in your life? There was one time in my life when I was, someone who's very, very dear to me had been hurt unjustly and terribly. And I was driving down to the Village Shopping Center from my house, and I saw this person walking in front of Houston Hardware Store. I was in my car, and I thought, what if I accidentally stepped on and just shoot him inside of Houston Hardware Store? And of course I wouldn't have done that, but I was upset and I was angry, and so that's what I do in the cozy mysteries, and that's what I did in A Fine Minute Murder. I thought, okay, we have a lot of people, and they have simple motives. This board member didn't rob them of $1 million. This board member cost them a job. This board member is trying to remove this lovely little girl from this school that she's thriving in because she's a little bit different, and the board member thinks she doesn't belong there. So, and you can see where her dad would want to wipe this woman right off the face of the earth. Those are the kinds of motives that evolve out of Safe Harbor. So, see, you would like to live there because they're really nice people. I also think that every murderer should have at least one redeeming quality. I mean, I don't think they're all bad. Like if I had actually gone through with my little plot, it wouldn't have been all bad. I mean, I would have ended up in prison, but my motives were good. So I do think, and I was thinking back through the other 8 books, and the murderers in those books, they're not someone I want to invite to dinner tonight, but either their motivation was understandable, or they had done other good things in their life, and the people who died as well. Some of them died and we don't really care. I mean, there's a reason for them dying. But it's the murders I'm more interested in, at least maintaining a tiny bit of goodness. And I think a lot of writers feel that way too, that they want to make their murderers semi